My name is Avery Monroe, and I was 34 the night a single sentence cracked my life along a fault line I didn't know ran through it. The call came at 2:07 a.m., not a ring so much as a drill into bone. I was awake before the second buzz, an animal sense that something had already gone wrong. On the screen, Tessa, my little sister. I answered and got nothing at first, just tinny breathing, then her voice snagged on tears. "He's back," she whispered. "He broke the door. Avery, Junie's with me in the bathroom. He's throwing—" I was already standing, yanking a hoodie over sleep-tangled hair, keys in hand. Beside me, Logan shifted on his side of the bed, the practiced role of someone for whom crisis was always a channel on a TV he hadn't paid for. "We have to go," I said, voice too steady, the way voices get when terror is standing behind them. He didn't open his eyes. "Your family drama isn't my problem, Ave. Handle it." 7 words as casual as lint. 7 words that rewired a decade of devotion in one electric flash. I didn't argue. For 6 years I'd been fluent in the dialect of justify his comfort. I didn't speak it this time. I grabbed my bag and ran, socks slipping on the hardwood, the front door's deadbolt reluctant like it knew better. In the driveway, the air was cold enough to bite. The street was empty. I drove too fast toward Tessa's small rental on the edge of everything. I found the front door hanging on one hinge and glass starbursted across the entry like a cruel constellation. Inside, the smell of spilled beer, hot electronics, male rage, a chair overturned, photos askew, a potted plant crushed into soil and ceramic. I called her name. From the bathroom behind a cracked door, a tiny voice that wasn't hers. "Auntie?" "Hey, I'm here," I said, Tessa's daughter's nickname catching in my throat. "It's Avery, Junebug. Open the door, baby. It's me." The lock clicked. The door inched. Tessa stood barefoot on tile, holding her toddler against her chest, both of them shaking. Crimson threaded Tessa's hairline where a shard had kissed her. "He left when I called 911, she said. "He said it wasn't over." It never is with men like that. It only pauses. Police arrived. Statements were given. The EMT gently parted Tessa's hair to clean and tape the cut, and I held Junie, 3 years old, soft as a bread roll, while she watched bright bandages appear like magic stickers. We collected what we could: 1 suitcase, a box of favorite books, a threadbare stuffed giraffe, and we went home. My home. Ours, for now. Logan was awake when we walked in, but he made a performance of not being. The lamplight caught the way he pretended to be asleep, jaw too staged, breathing too precise. "The guest room," I said, and Tessa murmured thanks that felt like apologies. Junie wanted the giraffe tucked in first, then her. I sang the song our grandmother used to sing, something about stars and boats and being carried. When I closed the door, I found Logan in the kitchen, quartering a glare like a lemon. "How long," he asked the cutting board, "is this situation going to last?" "As long as it takes," I said. He opened a cabinet harder than necessary. Porcelain startled. "I have a big week. I need sleep." "She needs safety." He smiled without humor, the way men do when they think they're being unfairly tested. "And I need my house back. Our house. My grandmother's house, actually. The one I inherited, and we had made ours." I swallowed that correction like a stone. "Go back to bed, Logan." 3 weeks followed, measured in small violences. Cabinet doors announcing themselves. A sigh as weapon. The eye roll he won't admit is a flinch maker. When Junie cried at 3 a.m., he stomped across the hall and shut our door with a theatrical sigh. When Tessa startled at the coffee grinder, he muttered, "Maybe she shouldn't escalate him." I watched him as if he were a bridge I'd been driving over for years, and had only recently noticed the hairline cracks lacing the steel. Cracks have sounds when they lengthen. The quiet ping of a locked phone face down at dinner, the cologne that returns with him from late meetings, the unfamiliar hotel charge hidden between 2 gas station receipts, a mailer about mortgage refinancing addressed to both of us that he snatched from the pile and slid, too smooth, into a drawer. He was chorus lining his neglect into contempt, one precise step at a time. I said nothing. I documented everything. On a Monday morning that was already brittle, Logan hustled into my office with his voice pitched to crisis. "Avery, it's Derek." His brother. "He's been arrested. Embezzlement. It's bad." There it was, the emergency that wasn't mine, suddenly ours. "He needs bail. A lawyer," Logan said. The press is at his house. Can your grandmother's place be a safe spot just for a few days? I sipped coffee I couldn't taste and scrolled my phone the way people do when they're browsing their own patients. Your family drama isn't my problem, I said, and watched the words land. He cycled through 3 colors of disbelief before arriving at anger. You can't be serious. This is different. How exactly? Because your brother stole from people on purpose while my sister was hiding from a man who wanted to break her face? That's not the same. You're right, I said. She's a victim. He called me heartless, selfish, vindictive, a thesaurus of punishment for a woman who had run into the dark alone. He called me that for 2 days straight. And maybe I would have caved. Old habits are rubber bands eager to snap back, except the universe likes receipts. The email thread found me, not the other way around. A bank alert that shouldn't have existed, a login reset I didn't request, a joint investment account with both our names, except I had never signed to open it. Funds siphoned over time from the retirement account I thought we were tending like a bonsai. Transfers between that account and one tagged to Derek Pierce. My fingerprint hovered over the screen, and in the reflection I could see a version of myself I didn't want to meet again. The woman who excuses, rationalizes, forgives too early, and forgets too late. I printed everything. Screenshot, export, PDF. I emailed a folder to myself, then to a name that lived rent-free in the back of my mind from a long-ago job in the prosecutor's office, a special agent who specialized in white-collar crime. You'll want to see this, I wrote. And then, because frailty often arrives disguised as anger, I made tea. It's ridiculous, the domestic theater of it, but the ritual kept my hands from shaking. That evening, I went to the bank in person, the way you go to a doctor to ask if the x-ray is really your broken bone. It was worse. The mortgage I thought we were dutifully paying, equal parts pride and security, had been quietly refinanced. My signature had somehow signed itself on a Tuesday afternoon when I was at a client intake across town. My late grandmother's house, my anchor, my inheritance, had been leveraged to fund an investment opportunity. The banker, a woman with kind hands, asked if I was okay. I said yes because you say yes when you're not. Outside, I watched a leaf detach itself from a branch and think it was elegant, this slow surrender. I served Logan papers that weren't divorce. There was no marriage to unwind, but might as well have been. A civil action, a restraining order on the property, a freeze on accounts, a request for injunctive relief, words that mean, stop touching what isn't yours. He sputtered that he needed me. These people Derek owes, he said, voice low. They don't care who pays. Then you better figure it out, I said, and in the saying felt something in my spine relocate to where it always should have been. The next morning, I woke to 4 flat tires and a message from an anonymous number. Consider your position. The security camera caught a hooded figure with a familiar gait, a familiar tilt of the head. I uploaded the clip to 3 places because paranoia is just experience humming at a higher frequency. At noon, a black sedan idled at the curb. A man in a suit stepped out with a smile that didn't reach anything like compassion. Ms. Monroe? He asked. We should discuss your boyfriend's obligations. Former, I said. He glanced past me at the house. At the window where a paper snowflake Junie had taped up was trying to let go. Beautiful family, he said, as if complimenting the view. Shame if debts became contagious. I held up my phone, hit record, and let the camera see his face, hear his cadence. Funny thing, I said. In my last life, I worked in a prosecutor's office. Chain of custody is a love language. Audio, video, timestamps. Would you like to say more for the record? His smile faltered. Before he could rebuild it, Hank Ramirez, my retired cop neighbor, rounded the hedge with his old German shepherd. Everything all right, Avery? We were just leaving, the man in the suit said, perfectly polite. But Ms. Monroe should know, debts have long shadows. So do federal investigations into extortion, I said, and kept recording until the sedan turned the corner and the street became ordinary again. Inside, Tessa was buttering toast she'd forgotten she was making. He looked at Junie's window? She asked. He looked away when he realized we don't live alone, I said. That counts. Logan texted 47 times that day. A pendulum swing. Threat, apology, promise, rage. I put my phone face down and watched the babies breathen. a mason jar tremble when a truck passed. The house felt both fragile and fortified. I baked lasagna like it was a spell. Tessa laughed at me, watery and grateful. I forgot food could be warm, she said, and I pretended not to understand. That night, after lights were out and the house breathed itself toward sleep, I stood in the hallway between the guest room and my own and understood with a clarity that scraped me clean. The man in my bed was the kind of emergency that dresses as stability, and the sentence he'd given me at 2:07 a.m. was a gift wrapped in contempt. A map, if I was willing to follow it. I was. Morning arrived like a verdict. Too bright through thin curtains, everything loud, the coffee maker gurgling like it was choking, the newspaper landing against the porch with the thunk of a delivered problem. On the front page, local exec arrested in pension scheme. Derek's mugshot looked like a man who had spent years believing gravity wouldn't apply to him. The article said $400,000, with the kind of blankness numbers get when they're in print and not inside the life of someone who can't afford for them to exist. Logan hovered behind me, the way people do when they want something while pretending they don't. We have to move fast, he said. Bail hearing is this afternoon. If he's out, we can get him to a real attorney, not the public. I folded the paper with care, the way my grandmother used to fold church programs. Your family drama isn't my problem, I said, this time without any tremor. The sentence didn't feel like revenge. It felt like returning a misdelivered package to the sender. He flinched. Avery, you don't understand. If he flips on people, if he starts naming names... If? I asked. He stole. The people he stole from had names first. Logan's mouth did the thing where it tried to decide whether he was the victim or the hero. He has 2 kids, he said. So does the pension fund, I said. Thousands of them. Retirements are children by another name. I poured coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink. Tessa stood in the doorway, hair pulled into a shaky ponytail, Junie anchored at her calf. Tessa's eyes flashed to mine in a quick apology for existing. I hated that. I wanted to take all the sorries out of her and plant flowers where they'd been. Logan exhaled through his nose. You're punishing me. I'm protecting what's mine, I said. There's a difference. After he left, door shut too sharply, hinges registering their objection, I spread our life across the dining table like I was setting a war map. Bank statements. Those hotel charges I'd circled in my phone now printed and highlighted. The refinance documents with my name rendered in a font my hand doesn't write. The email thread with Derek where bridge loan showed up 3 times like a joke about a bridge you plan to burn. I labeled folders, put sticky notes on the edge of lies, dates, amounts, IP addresses from the account logins that didn't match our router. This is what survivors do, I thought. We narrate chaos into something that fits in a binder. At the bank, a manager with a careful voice used the phrase identity misuse, which looked neat in a file and felt like a hand around my throat. She brought out the signature card. There it was, my name written by a stranger who knew my loops too well. Who notarized this? I asked. She checked. Mobile notary. The stamp is valid. She lowered her voice. It happens more than you'd think. I filed a police report and watched the officer type my history into a box too small for it. You know who did this? He asked. Yes, I said, and so do you. He didn't argue. Men like Logan leave fingerprints made of entitlement, not dust. Back home, I called a number I hadn't dialed in 7 years. Special Agent Lena Morales. White-collar crime. We'd overlapped back when I still thought justice was a building downtown rather than something you built with your hands. I didn't expect her to answer. She did. I said my name. She paused just long enough to remember the file drawer where I lived in her head. What's going on, Avery? Paper cuts, I said. That bleed like arteries. I gave her the short version. The joint investment account, the siphoned retirement funds, the refinance forged, Derek's arrest, the enforcer on my porch with a smile like a blade. Send me everything, she said. Not from your personal email. Use a new account and a device Logan's never touched. I didn't ask how she knew he'd touched my things. Men like Logan touch everything and call it love. I scanned, renamed, encrypted. Sent. Within an hour, she called back. We've had Derek on our radar for a while. Your boyfriend's name was starting to appear in places I don't love. This gives us a thread. I'm looping in the mortgage fraud unit and our financial forensics folks. What about the men who came to the house? I asked, thinking of the sedan, the not smile. If Logan owes them, we need to separate the civil from the criminal adjacent, Morales said. But if someone comes to your door again, you don't engage alone. Call me first, then 911. Do you have somewhere else to stay? This is my somewhere else, I said, and put a hand on the frame of my grandmother's kitchen doorway, the way a person touches a mezuzah. They don't get to take two homes from us. Then fortify, she said, and document. You were always good at that. When I hung up, Tessa was watching me with that big sister is a witch awe she'd had since we were kids, and I made her a fort out of couch cushions and told her it was a castle. What do we do now? She asked. Lasagna, I said, and a lawyer. I chose Naomi Patel because every time she showed up in the news, it was framed as a warning to men who underestimated the women in their lives. Her assistant put me on hold for 2 minutes, then patched me through. I told her the story, this time with legal nouns instead of personal ones. She asked clean questions, didn't look away from the ugliest parts. Come in at 4, she said. Bring your war map. We were early, carrying grief in grocery bags because the banker's box felt too on the nose. Naomi's office was spare. A desk, a wall of diplomas, a potted fig that had survived something. She laid the documents out like tarot. Okay, she said finally. We're going to lock everything down. TRO on the house and all accounts, injunctive relief to keep him from moving or encumbering assets, a civil conversion claim, and a claim for fraud. We'll also coordinate with the feds. You'll authorize full cooperation with their investigation. Meanwhile, you and your sister are visible. That's good. Visible? Tessa asked, startled. Predators prefer shadow, Naomi said gently. Community is a porch light. She slid a document across to me. You'll also want to file for a protective order tied to the property rather than the person, given the extortion risk. She paused. And I'm assigning an investigator. He'll do drive-bys. Cameras are good. A neighbor with a dog is better. Hank, I said, almost smiling. He has both. Naomi nodded, like that was a line item. One more thing, she said, tapping the refinance packet. This notary. We'll pull logs. If your signature was forged, the lender has exposure. That's leverage. Don't think of it as money. Think of it as a clawed-back piece of your life. I signed retainer papers with a pen that felt heavier than it should have. The pen clicked, the kind of noise you forget you're hearing until it stops. In the lobby, a woman about 24 stood with her purse in a death grip. She was pretty in that diligent way office girls are when they're trying to be taken seriously. Tan blazer, careful mascara. She stared at me too long. When our eyes met, she dropped her gaze so fast it looked like guilt fell out. On our way to the elevator, I heard her whisper into her phone, "She's here." The elevator doors closed. On the realization that I'd seen her in a photo from Logan's office Christmas party, standing too close to him for the story he'd told me about that night. Who was that? Tessa asked. Maybe a past tense, I said, and pressed my thumb hard into the elevator rail until the ache reminded me what present tense felt like. At home, there was a note tucked under the doormat in handwriting that might have been trying to disguise itself by being too neat. We can fix this. Meet me. An address. The cafe where Logan and I had had our first date, where sweetness had been a prediction instead of a memory. I took a photo of the note and texted it to Naomi and Agent Morales. Naomi's reply was immediate. Do not go alone. Morales's followed. Thank you. We may reach out. That evening, Logan called from an unfamiliar number. I let it go to voicemail. His message started with, "I'm sorry," and ended with, "You don't understand who's involved." Between those bookends, the word love used like currency, the word need used like a weapon. After dinner, I walked the perimeter of the house the way you do when you're learning a new language for safe. Camera lights blinked their little metronomes. The roses out front had started to bud, small fists deciding whether to open. Through the guest room window, I saw Tessa reading to Junie, the paper bag princess, of course. The dragon gets bored of chasing them when they stop being fun to terrorize. I wanted that for us, for the men to get bored and leave. At 9:13 p.m., my phone buzzed with an alert. Inmate release notification. Tessa's ex, out on bail. Anonymous payer. The words glowed like a disease under blacklight. My stomach dropped and then steadied. I hit speed dial. Naomi, I said when she picked up. We need to assume someone is trying to shake me by rattling my sister. We'll file to revoke, she said. Document contact attempts. Call 911 for any drive-by, any knock, any shadow too close to a window. Already doing it, I said. After I hung up, I opened a fresh note in my phone and typed a sentence I wanted to remember later. You are not the woman who begs the storm to stop. You are the woman who learns where the high ground is. At 10:02, a car idled across the street long enough to be a message. Hank's porch light popped on like a reflex. The car pulled away. In bed, I pressed the shell of my ear to the pillow, listening to the house talk to itself. The sigh of old wood, the hum of appliances, the whisper of a night that wanted to be uneventful and wasn't. I thought about Logan in that cafe, about his face when he realized charm was a tool that had dulled. I thought about the young woman in the lobby, her eyes promising a confession she didn't know how to give yet. I thought about the note under my doormat, its tidy letters pretending not to shake. At 2:07 a.m., I didn't sleep. I watched the ceiling and planned. Because the thing about turning points is that they arrive disguised as errands and email threads and tires that go flat in the night. You think they're inconveniences until you realize they're doorways. And I was done knocking. By the third morning, fear had stopped being a spike and settled into something steady, like background static. You can live around it, even make coffee over it, but you can't turn it off. I hadn't spoken to Logan in 2 days. Every new text preview on my phone was a small landmine. Avery, please. You don't understand. You're ruining both our lives. Then, you're making enemies you can't see. Then finally, just an image. A single rose on a countertop, its stem wrapped in twine. The rose meant something. I couldn't remember what. That was the worst part, how he'd woven meaning into everything until nothing was just itself anymore. By noon, a dark sedan eased to a stop outside the house. Tinted windows, engine humming like a promise. My stomach recognized the sound before my mind did. Tessa peeked through the blinds, panic quick in her voice. Avery, someone's out there again. I walked to the door slowly, heartbeat pacing itself like a drummer waiting for a cue. A man in a gray suit stepped out. Mid-40s, haircut that said expensive barber, not salon. He smiled the way you smile at someone you're about to lie to. Ms. Monroe? He asked, tone smooth as elevator music. That depends who's asking. He tilted his head, like we were old friends catching up. I represent certain investors who have an interest in Mr. Pierce's outstanding obligations. You're listed as a financial partner on several documents. Former partner, I corrected. He gave a small, amused exhale. Well, that's what we're here to clarify. Debts can be sticky, Ms. Monroe. They tend to outlive paperwork. His eyes flicked to the window where Tessa's silhouette moved past. Beautiful family. Would be a shame for anyone else to get entangled. That's when the shift happened. The subtle click in my spine. Fear shrank just enough for anger to take its seat. I lifted my phone, hit record. Funny thing about these cameras, I said. They sync to the cloud in real time. That sentence you just said? Already saved in 3 places. Time-stamped. Want me to forward the clip to Special Agent Morales with the Financial Crimes Unit? His smile didn't falter, but something behind it twitched. You misunderstand me. I don't think I do. A sound broke the tension. A door slamming across the street, followed by the sharp bark of a German shepherd. Hank Ramirez, retired police chief, denim jacket, authority radiating from posture alone, was walking toward us. Everything all right, Avery? Fine, I said. Just a misunderstanding about debts. The man's gaze darted between us, calculating. We were just leaving, he said smoothly, stepping back. But Ms. Monroe should know. Debts have long shadows. I took a step closer. So do federal investigations into extortion. He left without another word, the sedan rolling away like nothing had happened. But the smell of his cologne lingered, cheap musk and adrenaline. Tessa opened the door when I came in, Junie clutched against her hip. He saw us, Avery. Let him look, I said. He won't like what he finds. Still, I locked every bolt and turned on every outside light until the house looked like a stage. Bright, exposed, impossible to sneak up on. That night I called Naomi Patel. They came in person, I told her. Her voice was calm, clipped. Send me the footage. I'll forward it to Morales. You're doing everything right. Keep documentation visible. Think of it as armor. I'm tired of armor, I said quietly. I just want peace. Then we end this properly. The next morning, Morales called. We're officially opening a joint case, mortgage fraud, embezzlement, possible RICO violations. But we'll need more. Something that ties Logan directly to the transfers and to Derek's dealings with these collectors. How much more? Enough for a federal judge to see intent, she said. Emails, calls, verbal acknowledgement. You said he asked to meet? Yes, the cafe. Good. Let him think you're softening. We'll wire you up. The words hit me like a slap. You're asking me to wear a wire? We're not asking, Morales said gently. You're the only person he still trusts enough to talk freely to. He'll confess if he thinks he can win you back. I laughed, but it came out cracked. He doesn't want me back. He wants control. Exactly. Let him think he has it. When I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The morning light touched the edge of the table where Tessa had spilled coffee earlier. She looked at me over her mug. You're going to do it, aren't you? I don't see another way. What if something goes wrong? Then it goes wrong with me, not you. Her jaw tightened. You always do this. Throw yourself between danger and the rest of us. Someone has to. We didn't talk for the rest of breakfast. But when I left for my meeting with Morales later that day, I found a note taped to my steering wheel in Tessa's handwriting. Be brave, but come back. At the FBI field office, Morales laid out the plan. The wire was smaller than I expected, just a black button on my cardigan. Keep conversation natural, she said. Don't push. Let him incriminate himself. Got it. And Avery, she added, her tone softening, if he becomes violent, you disengage. 2 agents will be in the cafe posing as customers. You're not alone. Chip. For the first time in weeks, that statement sounded true. That night, I dreamt of the rose again, the one from Logan's photo. But in the dream, it wasn't on a counter. It was pressed between pages of a book I hadn't opened in years. When I woke, I realized it wasn't a warning. It was bait. The next morning, I texted him. We need to talk. The cafe. Noon. He responded within a minute. Finally. I didn't reply. Before I left, Tessa followed me to the door. Promise you'll come back. I looked at her, at Junie coloring on the floor behind her, at the house that smelled faintly of cinnamon and fear. I promise. Outside, the air was sharp, the kind that feels like change. I drove toward the cafe where everything had started and where, one way or another, everything was going to end. The cafe looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just outgrown the version of myself that once waited there, heart pounding, believing in a man who said the right things at the right times. Now, I sat by the window where sunlight spilled across the table, my cardigan buttoned just so, the tiny wire no bigger than a seed. My pulse thudded in my ears, steady and loud, like my own private metronome counting down to whatever came next. Logan arrived 5 minutes late, wearing the same navy jacket from that Christmas party photo, the one with the young woman in the tan blazer. He looked like a ghost of the man I'd loved, stubble grown in patches, tremor in his hands, eyes darting like he was listening to invisible voices. Avery, he said, sliding into the chair across from me. Thank you for coming. I nodded but said nothing. Let silence do the heavy lifting. He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup, knuckles pale. I know I messed up. I know I lied. Messed up, I repeated. That's one way to describe stealing my inheritance, forging my name, dragging me into crimes I didn't commit. He flinched, voice lowering. I can explain. Then explain. And he did, words tumbling out in a messy confession disguised as justification. It started small, he said. His brother Derek had found an investment, something too good to miss. He'd only borrowed from the retirement account to help the family. Derek promised he'd pay it back before I noticed. Then the market dipped, the investors turned out to be loan sharks, and suddenly they owed people who didn't accept IOUs. Derek panicked and started embezzling. Logan refinanced the house to fix everything. I was trying to protect you, he said, voice trembling. I leaned forward. By lying to me? By putting my family in danger? He rubbed his face. I had no choice. You had every choice, I said quietly. You just chose wrong. The barista set down a new order for the next table, the clink of cups louder than it should have been. Logan's eyes flicked toward the noise, then back to me. You don't understand, Ave. The people Derek owed. They're still out there. They want their money back. Then tell the FBI about them. His eyes widened, pupils shrinking. You're wearing a wire. I didn't answer, didn't move, just met his stare and let him see that I wasn't the woman who'd looked away anymore. You, he started, then lunged across the table, grabbing the front of my cardigan. The cup between us toppled, hot coffee splattering across his sleeve, the table, the floor. Chairs scraped. someone shouted. "Sir, let her go," a voice boomed. Two men, not baristas after all, surged from the counter. Logan was on the ground before I could blink, wrists pinned, face pale with shock. "You stupid," he hissed, and that was when Agent Morales appeared beside me, calm as a surgeon. "It's over, Mr. Pierce." I sat frozen, heart still galloping, coffee soaking into my jeans. Morales knelt beside me. "You did good, Avery. We got everything." But I didn't feel good. I felt hollowed out, like the inside of a bell that had just been struck too hard. That night, I lay on the couch at home while Tessa covered me with a blanket. I was still trembling, not from fear this time, but from the sudden absence of it. For 6 years, fear had been the gravity I lived under, pulling every choice, every breath toward him. Now it was gone, and the world felt too light. "I loved him," I whispered. "I really loved him." "I know," Tessa said softly, pressing a hand over mine. "But he didn't love you the same way. He loved control." I turned my face toward the ceiling. How did I not see it? "Because he was good at pretending," she said, "and you were good at believing." She was right. Love had been a blindfold, and I'd worn it proudly. The next morning, Morales called. "Logan's in custody. Derek's already cutting a deal. The evidence you gathered ties both to the loan sharking operation. You just made our case airtight." "What happens now?" I asked. "We'll build it from here. You did your part." I hung up, staring at my reflection in the kitchen window. The faint bruise on my collarbone where Logan's hand had grabbed me, the exhaustion around my eyes. I didn't recognize that woman anymore, but maybe that was a good thing. Later that week, Naomi Patel called too. "Charges are formal: mortgage fraud, conspiracy, obstruction, and document forgery. We'll freeze all his assets. The house will be yours again, uncontested." I thought that would feel like victory. It didn't. It just felt quiet. At night, when the house went still, I'd wake at 3 a.m., convinced I heard a car idling outside. My body didn't know how to stop anticipating danger. One evening, I stood in the kitchen watching Tessa teach Junie how to mix pancake batter. Junie was giggling, flour everywhere. For a brief moment, the house felt safe again. I let myself breathe. Then my phone buzzed, an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. "Avery Monroe?" a man's voice asked. "This is Officer Calder with the county jail. Just letting you know your complaint led to additional charges being filed. Good work." "Good work," I repeated after hanging up. The phrase didn't fit. There's no good in dismantling a life, even when it's necessary. That night, I dreamed of the roses in my grandmother's garden, red blooms growing from black soil, roots tangled around something metallic, something buried. When I woke, the message was clear. Justice grows in ugly dirt. And I wasn't done planting. The trial moved faster than I expected. Paperwork flying like confetti, each page another piece of the man I used to know, stripped bare by evidence. Logan's charges read like a shopping list of betrayal, mortgage fraud, embezzlement conspiracy, forgery, obstruction, witness intimidation. I sat through the hearings because I needed to see it through, not for revenge, but for proof that I hadn't imagined the monster under the skin. He pled guilty to most counts. Derek, his brother, cut a deal, taking 20 years in federal prison in exchange for full cooperation. Logan avoided a life sentence by turning over financial records and naming his co-conspirators. The courtroom air was cold enough to sting. When the judge asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement, I said yes. My hands didn't shake when I spoke. "He didn't just steal money," I said. "He stole peace, safety, time I can't get back. But he didn't steal my future. I took that with me when I walked out." For the first time since I'd known him, Logan didn't interrupt. After the sentencing, Naomi met me outside. "You'll keep the house," she said, "and with the fraud judgment, you'll recover a significant settlement once assets are liquidated." Money, I thought, can't buy peace, but maybe it could buy breathing room. That night, when I got home, Tessa was making spaghetti, Junie coloring dinosaurs at the table. "It's over," I said. Tessa turned off the burner and hugged me so tight I almost cracked. "Then we start again," she whispered. Starting again wasn't the clean slate I expected. It was quieter, lonelier. Some nights I still woke at 3 a.m., checking locks, replaying the sound of Logan's voice in that cafe. My therapist, Dr. Brennan, said trauma is like an echo, fading, but only if you stop shouting back at it. "You're safe now," she reminded me each session, "but your body doesn't believe it yet." I wanted to believe it. I planted tomatoes in the backyard, fixed the creaking gate, replaced every lock myself. Each tiny act felt like reclaiming territory. Tessa started night classes in social work. Junie began kindergarten, her laughter gradually replacing the echo of breaking glass. Slowly, the house began to sound like home again. One afternoon, a thick envelope arrived from Naomi's office. Inside were the settlement papers, restitution from Logan's frozen accounts, insurance payouts, his share of the house deed legally voided. I sat at the kitchen table, holding the check like it was radioactive. "Looks like you won," Tessa said. "I didn't win," I said. "I survived." But maybe surviving was the win. 2 months later, Naomi invited me to a lunch downtown. "You're not going to like it at first," she warned, "but hear me out." At the cafe, different from that cafe, she slid a newspaper across the table. Headline: Pierce Brothers victims receive partial restitution. Federal investigation expands. Underneath, a smaller headline: Monroe named. In civil suit against lenders. Naomi grinned. "They're going after the banks. The forged refinance could expose systemic negligence. They want you as a witness." I blinked. "You mean testify? Again?" "You'd be the credible face of the victims. It's bigger than Logan now. This is about everyone who's ever had their signature stolen and their trust weaponized." I sat back, exhaling. I wanted peace, not publicity. "Peace doesn't change anything," she said. "You could." That night, I stood in the garden under the porch light, the one Hank had installed brighter at my request. The roses my grandmother planted decades ago were blooming again, stubborn, perfect. Maybe peace and purpose weren't opposites. Maybe one was born from the other. When the lawsuit ended months later, the bank settled quietly. My restitution doubled. Naomi called it poetic justice. I called it closure. But closure doesn't erase scars, it gives them meaning. I used the money to pay off the house and fund something new. A legal aid program Naomi helped design, providing free counsel for women leaving abusive or financially manipulative relationships. We started small, 3 lawyers, 1 counselor, a single-floor office downtown. Tessa helped paint the walls. Junie drew a sign that said "Safe Starts" in rainbow crayon. On opening day, I stood in front of the glass door, hand trembling over the key. "Ready?" Naomi asked. "More than ever," I said, and turned it. Inside, the air smelled like paint and hope. Weeks later, Logan's mother showed up unannounced at the clinic. She looked smaller, older, grief carved deep into her cheeks. "I wanted to apologize," she said. "I thought you destroyed my son's life. I didn't realize he'd already done it himself." I nodded, unsure what to say. "He made choices." "So did you," she said. "Better ones." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a donation check. 6 figures. Her inheritance from Logan's late father. "Use it for the clinic," she said. "Do something good with it." I hesitated. "Are you sure?" She nodded, tears trembling. "It's blood money anyway. Maybe this way it finally does some good." I accepted it, but only after she agreed to volunteer. 10 hours a week, I said. "You'll sit with survivors. Listen. Learn what men like your son destroy." She flinched, but nodded. And she kept that promise. The clinic grew fast. Too fast. Within a year, we'd helped 50 women secure restraining orders, start divorces, reclaim stolen assets. Local news called it the Monroe Initiative. Sometimes I stood in the hallway, listening to quiet sobs of relief, laughter through tears, the sound of women realizing they weren't trapped anymore. Each story echoed mine, but ended differently, sooner, safer. One evening, Naomi handed me a folder of impact reports. "Look at this," she said. "You've changed more lives in a year than he destroyed in a lifetime." I smiled faintly. Then I guess we're finally even. That night, as I locked up, I thought of Logan in prison. Gray walls, fluorescent lights, counting days instead of fixing them. I didn't wish him pain, just perspective. Sometimes justice isn't about punishment. It's about the space you create once the noise stops. I walked out into the night air, free in a way I hadn't been for years. The clinic became the axis of my new life, the place where everything broken in me started to find its shape again. We renamed it officially, the Lawson Legal Clinic, after my grandmother, whose house had been our refuge. Naomi thought it gave the project gravitas. I thought it gave it roots. Every day, the waiting room filled with stories that looked like mine told in different dialects. A woman whose husband hid dead in her name, another whose fiancé had drained her college fund, one who was still learning she wasn't crazy for wanting out. We didn't just file paperwork, we built escape routes. I started doing outreach sessions, teaching women how to read fine print, how to check mortgage records, how to document financial abuse before it bloomed into something worse. Paper trails save lives, I'd say, because abusers hate receipts. At first, it was work. Then it became calling. 6 months in, we held a small fundraising gala. Nothing glamorous. Mismatched chairs, donated wine, a borrowed projector that hummed too loudly. But the room was full. Reporters, survivors, supporters. Naomi nudged me. You should speak. I wasn't planning to. Exactly why you should. When I stepped up to the podium, my heart thudded like the first time I'd heard Logan say, "Your family drama isn't my problem." But this time, I owned the silence. I once built my whole life around being useful, I said. Helpful, harmless. And when everything collapsed, I thought I had nothing left. But sometimes collapse is just clarity in disguise. This clinic exists because we stopped accepting pain as normal, because we stopped confusing survival with weakness, because someone once told me my pain wasn't their problem, and I decided to make it everyone's problem. When I finished, the applause was raw and human and real. Weeks turned into months. The clinic grew beyond its walls. Local news picked up our story, then state officials, then national organizations. Funding poured in, not from pity, but from recognition. Tessa finished her degree in social work and joined us full-time. She handled counseling and community outreach, her calm voice a balm for women shaking in chairs the way she once had. Junie, now 7, spent afternoons coloring in the break room, leaving dinosaurs taped to filing cabinets like mascots. I like helping people, she told me once, like you and Mommy. You already do, I said. Sometimes, I still woke from dreams of the night Logan said those 7 words, but they didn't hurt anymore. They echoed like an origin story, not a wound. Therapy had taught me that forgiveness isn't a gift you give the person who hurt you. It's the permission slip you give yourself to stop being tethered. So I forgave him, quietly, privately, in a letter I never sent. Then I moved on. One afternoon, Naomi walked into my office holding a thick envelope. "From the Department of Justice," she said. "The FBI's RICO case is closing. You're officially listed as a primary civilian collaborator. They want to commend you publicly." I laughed softly. "I didn't do it for credit." "I know," she said. "That's why you deserve it." Inside was a letter signed by Agent Morales herself. "Your courage not only helped dismantle a criminal network, but also protected countless future victims. Thank you for reminding us why this work matters." I framed it not as proof of heroism, but as proof of survival. That summer, the clinic moved to a larger building downtown, a renovated courthouse, sunlit and symbolic. We painted the walls a soft green, the color of safety. On the front desk, I placed a small sign carved from wood. "We build what we needed," because that's exactly what we'd done. 2 years later, we hosted our biggest event yet, the grand opening of a family justice center combining legal aid, therapy, and transitional housing. Naomi called it Phase 2. I called it the future. As I stood outside during the ribbon cutting, a breeze carried the smell of roses from the planters lining the sidewalk, a faint echo of my grandmother's garden. I smiled at the crowd, at Tessa beside me, at Junie holding the giant ceremonial scissors. "Ready?" I asked. Junie nodded solemnly. "Let's save people." The ribbon fell. The crowd cheered. And for the first time in a decade, I realized I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living. That night, we celebrated with cheap champagne and loud laughter. Naomi teased me for getting emotional when someone donated enough to fund a full year of free legal services. "I'm not crying," I said, wiping my eyes. "I'm just allergic to justice." Months later, a letter arrived from the State Corrections Department. Logan's sentence had been extended. New charges uncovered during the investigation. 12 years total. I read it twice, felt nothing. Not hate, not satisfaction. Just peace. Tessa found me sitting on the porch that evening, the sunset pooling gold over the garden. "You okay?" "They extended his sentence," I said. She nodded. "Good." We sat quietly, watching Junie chase fireflies across the yard. "You know what's strange?" I said. "I don't hate him anymore." "That's not strange," Tessa said. "That's freedom." She was right. The next morning, I opened my laptop and began drafting something new, a guidebook for survivors navigating financial abuse and legal manipulation. Chapter 1's title came to me immediately. "When they say it's not their problem, make it yours." Because that's what healing had taught me. Pain doesn't vanish, it transforms. And sometimes the map you leave behind is the most powerful thing you'll ever create. Years folded into each other, the way good seasons do, quietly, without announcement. The clinic grew from a single hallway of battered desks into a 3-story hub with lawyers, counselors, daycare volunteers, and a waiting list that never stopped moving. We stopped being the Monroe sisters who survived and became the Monroe sisters who built something. Tessa thrived in her new skin. She wore confidence like it had always been tailored for her. Junie, 8 now, turned the break room into her personal gallery of dinosaur sketches and motivational notes taped under light switches. You are braver than your bad day. I'd stopped measuring life by what I'd lost and started measuring it by what I was making. One morning, Naomi found me staring at the clinic's donation wall, where each engraved name meant a story, a life changed. You're restless, she said. Busy isn't the same as purpose, I admitted. She smiled. Then maybe it's time to tell the story that started all this. A week later, a local journalist came to interview me for a feature on financial abuse. I told her the truth, pared down to its bones. The night my boyfriend rolled over and said, "Your family drama isn't my problem. The fraud, the fear, the fight back." When the article came out, it went viral overnight. Suddenly, our small clinic wasn't just a local refuge. It was a national blueprint. Emails poured in from across the country, women asking for help, men wanting to volunteer, donors offering funds. Naomi called it momentum. I called it a responsibility. In the middle of all the growth, an envelope arrived. Thin, no return address. Inside was a letter in Logan's handwriting. I almost threw it away, but curiosity is its own ghost. Avery, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that every day in here, I think about what I destroyed. Not the money. You. I was so afraid of being nothing that I turned you into collateral. You were right about everything. I hope you found peace. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and slid it into the back of my desk drawer. Not out of sentiment, out of completion. Tessa saw the return stamp later and asked, "How do you feel?" "Indifferent," I said. She smiled. "That's power, you know." She was right. Indifference was the final frontier of healing. The clinic's work kept expanding. We launched financial literacy programs, housing partnerships, even emergency relocation services. Every time we helped a client start over, I saw a reflection of my old self, terrified, trembling, but still moving forward. At our 5-year anniversary gala, I gave a speech to a crowd of survivors turned advocates. People ask how I moved on, I told them. I didn't. I built forward. There's a difference. The applause rose like a wave. By the time Junie turned 10, we'd opened 2 more branches in nearby cities. Tessa's office wall was plastered with client thank you notes and crayon drawings. She was the calm center of our whirlwind, proof that survival isn't just escape, it's reinvention. One evening, she and I sat on the clinic roof after hours, paper cups of wine in hand, the skyline pink and forgiving. "Do you ever think about him?" she asked quietly. "Sometimes," I admitted, but only as a landmark, like, that's where the road changed. "Not as a wound?" "No," I said, watching the sunset fade. "Wounds close, roads go on." Months later, Naomi brought me news I hadn't expected. "They're offering you a national award," she said, sliding a formal letter across my desk, "for contributions to family justice reform." I laughed, startled. "Me? I'm just one story that didn't end badly." "Exactly," Naomi said. "That's what people need to see, that it's possible to write another ending." The ceremony was overwhelming. Lights, cameras, the hum of applause. When I stepped on stage, the same nervous tremor I'd felt wearing that wire years ago returned, but this time it wasn't fear, it was purpose. "Once upon a time," I said, "I was told my pain wasn't anyone's problem. Turns out it was the seed of every solution I've built since." People stood. I didn't cry. I smiled, a real one. That night, after the noise faded, I drove home through quiet streets lined with autumn leaves. I parked outside my house and sat for a long time before going in. The porch light Hank installed years ago was still there, glowing steadily. I whispered to the night, to the ghost of who I'd been, "See, we made it." And for once, the silence that answered felt like agreement. 10 years after that night, the night that started everything, I found myself standing outside a federal parole hearing room. The air smelled like disinfectant and history. The clerk double-checked my name. "You don't have to do this," she said. "I know," I replied. "That's why I'm here." I wasn't there for Logan. I was there for closure, the kind that doesn't come in letters or settlements or applause, the kind that only comes when you stare down the ghost and realize it's smaller than you remembered. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. Gray threaded through his hair, shoulders rounded, skin papery and pale. His eyes met mine just once. The years had drained the arrogance, leaving something hollow. The board asked questions about remorse, rehabilitation, restitution. Logan's voice was low, almost careful. I destroyed lives, he said. I blamed everyone but myself. But I did it. I was selfish. I thought love was ownership. Now I know it's trust. And I broke every bit of it. He didn't look at me when he said it. Maybe that was respect. Maybe it was shame. They granted parole, 60 days to release. When the room cleared, he approached, hands cuffed, guards close behind. Thank you for coming, he murmured. I didn't come for you, I said. He nodded slowly. Then why? To see the door close for good. His mouth opened like he wanted to say something else, but the guard guided him away. He looked back once, a flicker of something that might have been gratitude or grief. I couldn't tell. Outside, sunlight poured through the courthouse steps, warm and indifferent. My phone buzzed. Tessa. Tessa, how'd it go? Me. It's over. Tessa. Good. Dinner at our place. Junie wants to show you her science project. Me. On my way. At their house, my grandmother's house once upon a time, the porch was strung with fairy lights. Junie, now 10, launched into a breathless explanation about chlorophyll and photosynthesis, her hands waving through the air like punctuation marks. Tessa laughed, proud and radiant. I sat there, surrounded by the hum of safety, the laughter, the smell of roasted garlic, the chatter of normal life, and realized this was the prize all along. Not revenge, not victory, just peace that stayed put. After dinner, when Junie drifted to sleep on the couch, Tessa poured 2 glasses of wine. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Leaving him? Everything that came after. I thought about it for a long moment. No. If I could go back, I'd tell that terrified woman driving through the dark that night, you're going to be okay. Better than okay. You're going to build something beautiful out of what breaks you. Tessa smiled, eyes soft. You did. So did you. We clinked glasses, the sound small and perfect. Years kept moving. The clinic became the Lawson Center for Family Justice, offering not just legal aid, but housing, therapy, and job training. Survivors became advocates. Volunteers became staff. Our waiting room turned into a launch pad. When I turned 50, Naomi threw a surprise party. You're officially a legend now, she said, handing me a plaque. I rolled my eyes, but a lump formed in my throat. I still visited Grandma's garden often. The roses she planted decades ago were wild now, blooming in every color. Sometimes I stood there barefoot in the dirt and thought about how everything I'd loved and lost had led me to this moment. One evening, as the sun bled pink across the sky, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered out of habit. Is this Avery Monroe? A man asked. This is Officer Dillard from the county hospital. You're listed as the emergency contact for a patient, Logan Pierce. My stomach didn't drop this time. It barely moved. What happened? Car accident. He's in critical condition. I hesitated. I'm not family. You're the only contact listed. I went anyway, not for him, but for the part of me that needed to close every open tab in my soul. At the hospital, the hallway lights hummed too bright. Logan lay pale against the sheets, machines breathing for him. A doctor stood beside me. He may not wake up, she said. If he does, rehabilitation will be long. Someone will need to make medical decisions. That's not me, I said. She nodded gently. You were his emergency contact. I'll sign whatever releases you need, I said, but I won't make his choices for him. Even unconscious, he doesn't get to trap me again. Before I left, I stood by his bed. I forgive you, I said quietly. Not because you earned it, but because I'm done carrying you. Then I walked out, the automatic doors sliding open like a benediction. 5 years later, my book, Beautiful Ruins, Building Purpose from Pain, hit the shelves. I didn't write it to relive the past, but to map escape routes for others. Each chapter ended with resources, checklists, ways out. It became a bestseller, then a movement. On tour, I met women who'd left marriages after decades, men who'd broken cycles, teenagers who said they finally understood love wasn't supposed to hurt. Every story felt like a ripple from a single night that had changed everything. One woman in her 60s hugged me and said, "You saved my life." I smiled. "No," I told her. "You did. I just showed you the door." 2 decades after the night that began it all, I returned to my grandmother's garden with Tessa and Junie, now grown, standing tall beside the roses. Junie had become a social worker, her eyes bright with the same fire I'd once borrowed to survive. "Do you ever think about him?" she asked gently. "Not really," I said. "I think about who I became because of what he did." She nodded. "I'm proud of you, Aunt Avery." I smiled, feeling the weight of years loosen. I'm proud of all of us. As dusk fell, fireflies flickered above the flowers, tiny lanterns over old wounds. I closed my eyes, breathed in the scent of roses, and felt something I hadn't known was possible all those years ago. Peace that didn't need explanation. Closure that didn't need witnesses. A last door, finally shut. Not locked, not slammed, just closed softly enough to let the past rest behind it.